So if now I'm someone listening to this and I'm struggling, I don't know where to start. I don't know how should I get into this frame of mind. All of these models are interesting to me, but how do I start to implement them? Can you give a bit of a, very high level overview of how do I start doing this? How do I make sure that I'm on the path to success, especially if you are a creator or you're an entrepreneur doing something and I'm, someone who's in a bit of a rut and, nothing's going for me, but I need to have some discipline. I need to have some systems around me. What processes, models, systems, you name it, can you suggest to someone starting to learn about this for the first time?
The first thing I would say to everybody is if you're a creator, there's something that you need to create. Whether you're a writer, you're a painter, you're a coder, you figure out what that thing is and then make sure that your schedule is designed in a way that you're actually doing that thing. Because I know a lot of painters who only paint once a week or when the spirit strikes them. And one of my favorite quotes is, I don't have a muse, I have a mortgage. Right? Like the muse shows up when you show up to do the work. And she punches in if you punch in. And that's number one, is like, we can talk about these fancy systems until we're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, it's very simple. You just have to do the work. Number two, any system can be effective if you actually implement it. Even a really bad system is better than no system if you use it. And so don't try chasing the perfect thing. If you've heard some things in this conversation that resonated with you, start with those things. Because those things that resonated, they probably plucked on something that you like, some chord inside of you where you're like, yes, I think that's the thing I need to work on. So start there. And it's not about trying to go and implement the whole system perfectly from the beginning, because that's not how it works. I can't send you a UPS package with the perfect productivity system in a box where you pop it open and you're like, cool, now we're good to go. It's a process of like slow implementation, and what works for me might not work for you, and what works for Barry might not work for me, right? So like you have to take the pieces that resonate, that will work for you, plug them in, and you have to not be afraid to discard the parts that don't make sense. And for me, my systems are constantly evolving because who I am today is different than I was a year ago versus 3 years ago. And so my systems have to constantly change and update. And we can't be too ideological about saying, well, this is how I've always done it, therefore this is how I need to always do it, right? You have to be constantly experimenting and tweaking things to say, okay, does this still serve me? For a long time, for instance, I did gratitude journaling for like 4 years. In the beginning, it was great. By the end of it, for the last like year and a half, I literally was just going through the motions, and I was just writing things down that I was grateful for, with air quotes. But at the end of the day, like I didn't feel the gratitude. And so I was checking the box, but the system no longer served me. It took me a really long time to realize, like, what am I doing this for? Like, it doesn't work anymore for me. And part of you might feel like, oh, I'm just doing it wrong. No, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just might mean that you've outgrown it, or it's time to try something different. So whatever you're going to do as you're trying to implement these systems, just recognize that it's not going to be a perfect one-to-one. What I'm telling you might not perfectly work for you, but start small, because the game is all about consistency, not intensity. So a little bit of systemization is better than a whole lot that you never use. So if you can show up every single day and you can start like building for 10, 15 minutes towards time blocking your calendar, and then figuring out what's your 3 to free and just focusing on those, and then figuring out what's your focus ritual, like just a little bit every single day. And then you'll get to the point where you have a fairly robust system, but in the beginning, it's not going to look like much. So don't get too hard on yourself, because I know so many people that just go hog wild out of the gate, and then they lose all steam because it's not coming together fast enough.